Welcome to something new we're doing here at Hope and New Life, here starting in June of 2021. As our worship life returns to be more and more like what it was before the pandemic, with singing and hymns inside as part of our regular worship service, we're going to be changing what we put up on Sunday morning. So it will be basically a sense of what's happening here in one of our buildings at Hope in Homer City or New Life in Marion Center on a Sunday morning. But we're also wanting to offer a chance to get a sneak preview, a look ahead at what our conversations are going to be centered on in the scriptures in the coming Sunday. So, in advance of this coming Sunday, the second Sunday after Pentecost, we wanted to share this kind of a conversation with you. Spend a little bit of time in the gospel, the reading from the stories of Jesus that are going to be the focus of our worship this coming Sunday, and to start some conversation, to invite your own faithful imagination about where God's leading you and how we might be a part of the conspiracy of goodness that Jesus calls us and invites us to be a part of, that we sometimes call the reign of God. Here are words then from Mark's Gospel. This is in the 3rd chapter of Mark, and you can find it starting in the 20th verse. The crowd came together again so that they could not even eat. When Jesus' family heard it, they went out to restrain him, for the people were saying, "He has gone out of his mind." And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem said, "He has Beelzebul, and by the ruler of demons he casts out demons." And he called them to him and spoke to them in parables. "How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but his end has come. But no one can enter a strong man's house and plunder his property without first tying up the strong man. Then indeed the house can be plundered. Truly I tell you, people will be forgiven of their sins and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit can never have forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. For they had said he has an unclean spirit." Then his mother and his brothers came, and standing outside, they sent to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you." And he replied, "Who are my mother and brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." This is the gospel of the Lord. So I'm here today in the churchyard because Jesus is a thief, and he's recruiting you and me to be a part of his crew. Maybe that still doesn't make sense of why I'm planting tomatoes here in the churchyard. Let's start with Jesus. Better yet, let's start with a good heist movie story. You probably know how those kind of stories go. They've been making them for decades. The classic go-to one in my mind is Ocean's 11, that remake of the old Rat Pack movie. The one in my memory is the one with George Clooney and Brad Pitt and a whole host of other movie stars. The movie's all about watching a crew of criminals plan to rob casinos. And strangely enough, you're supposed to root for the criminals. You're supposed to be rooting for them to get away with their grand heist plan to rob the casinos, and somehow their thievery is supposed to be something you're supposed to be cheering for, because you're supposed to be wanting them to get away with it, because somehow they're really good fellas after all, and the people they're robbing are the bad guys somehow. Heist movies work like that, you know? Maybe it seems a little bit weird that you're supposed to be rooting for would-be casino robbers or bank robbers or anything like that, but that's how the logic of a heist movie works, that somehow those characters are the ones who are somehow deep down the lovable rascals that you want to see get away, and that the people they're robbing somehow are deserving of it. That's how a heist movie works, even though it usually turns our standard way of picturing, cops and robbers as good guys and bad guys sort of upside down. Jesus, interestingly enough, does something similar, and it's so surprising, and it comes and goes so quickly in Mark's gospel you almost might miss it. The scene starts with Jesus getting in trouble with the respectable religious people, something Jesus often does. They're upset because they notice that Jesus seems to have this power where he can speak against the evil spirits, the powers of evil that seem to be all around, and they listen to him, they obey him. Jesus has an authority that the respectable religious religious people don't have. And so their conspiracy theory is, well, okay, Jesus must be in league with those demons. He must be in league with the evil spirits, and it's all sort of a big con job. Jesus must be working with the demons, and that's why they listen to him. And Jesus' response is, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. If I'm stopping evil spirits, why would I be on their side? No, I'm working against them. And Jesus then trots out this surprising Ocean's 11 heist movie kind of a theme. He says, if you're going to rob a strongman and take the stuff that's in his house, first you got to tie up the strongman, and then you're free to plunder his house. Whatever he's got, you can take and rob. Jesus describes himself in those terms. Jesus sort of casts himself as the thief of God and describes that basically the powers of evil have an awful lot of people under their control. Whether it was evil spirits that seemed to be roaming freely in the ancient world or whatever other powers were around. The empire, certainly around every corner, sure made it look like the powers of darkness, the powers of evil were calling the shots. Jesus says he's come to be the one who robs the powers of evil. And all of us, all the people who are trapped inside the powers of evil, who are captive in that power, in whatever ways it looks like, Jesus has come to set us free, to rescue us. As Jesus is performing the great heist. Jesus is the thief of God, in a sense. He's like Danny Ocean. He's George Clooney's character in the movie, or Frank Sinatra's character in the original Ocean's 11, who's there to perform a robbery in order to liberate us who have been held captive by the powers of evil. It's an interesting, surprising way of talking and thinking, but in a way it makes sense of everything Jesus does. Jesus is all about setting people free who are held captive to the powers of the day. So whether it's people who are held captive by illness or by spirits that are beyond their understanding or control, or who are held captive by the way everybody else has made them outcast and ostracized them, or their own past, whatever things people are held captive by, whatever are the strong man kind of forces that hold them captive, Jesus has come to plunder the strong man, to tie up the strong man and rob him blind, to take all the things that are held captive by the powers of evil and to set them free. And Jesus invites us to be a part of that work as well. He calls his followers to be a part of his same work. This is what makes me think of a heist movie, is that in any classic heist movie, your Ocean's 11, your Great Train Robbery, whatever, a critical part in the story is how whoever is the mastermind of the plan assembles the crew of people, and how they're all going to have a part in the grand heist, how they're going to steal from the villain who is the one they're going to rob in the story. And you and I then get to be a part of Jesus' crew, so to speak. Jesus has called you and me to be part of his work, his grand thievery of all the powers of evil, to set all people and everything in creation free from everything that holds them captive. Like I say, it's sort of a strange image, a strange way of thinking of you and me being recruited to be thieves in Jesus' robbery crew. But in a way, that's exactly what it is, that everything we do, it is a step toward goodness or kindness for the reign of God. It is a way of setting somebody free from something that holds them captive. It doesn't necessarily mean that you and I are going to be going out casting out demons like Jesus did 2,000 years ago. But every action you and I take that can set somebody else free from what's holding them down, that's an act that's part of Jesus' work to bring liberation, to bring freedom for everybody. It means we're like part of Jesus' crew. And that's the other interesting thing. At the end of this whole scene, Jesus is in the house and teaching people, and outside come his mother and his brothers and sisters, and they're asking to see him, and they seem to be very upset that they're not getting an audience with Jesus, because they also kind of think Jesus is kind of, off his rocker, and they kind of want to wheel him back in. And Jesus' response is surprising and beautiful. He turns around and he looks around at everybody there gathered. He says, "Who are my mother and brother and sisters? Here are my mother and brother and sisters. Whoever does the will of God is my mother and sister and brother." In other words, you and I, we're invited to belong apart from our biology, apart from being biologically related to Jesus or having the right ethnicity or nationality or background. It's not our biology that makes us belong. Are we going to be a part of Jesus' work, setting people free, helping liberate everybody and everything from all that holds them captive? That's the work we're called to. That's what Jesus' ministry is all about. Everywhere. It's what happens at the cross, to be sure, but it's everywhere Jesus goes. He's setting people free from whatever is holding them down. So that's why I'm in the churchyard, because I know, this doesn't look like the place for a heist to take place. But in an important way, everything we do as the followers of Jesus is about helping set other people free, because we've been brought into Jesus' good work, so we're part of helping bring other people more fully to life. So here, in the churchyard here, we're planting tomatoes with the thoughts that we're going to take the fresh produce that comes here and give it away to the local food bank, because there are people who are held captive by food insecurity, people who don't know where the next meal is going to come from, and sometimes all they can get is canned, beans or the things that nobody else wants to eat, so they donate it to the local food bank. You don't always get fresh produce when you are the one depending on a food bank to offer you food. So part of our plan is, here in this place, how can we help people who are held captive to not getting good nutrition? How can we at least do something with the space that we've got? And so every action we take that helps our neighbors to be able to eat well so that they can have better lives and energy and better nutrition and better health, that's setting people free from something that holds them captive. So part of Jesus' grand plan to set people free, includes tomato plants. Or later on today, we're going to be giving out things to people so that we can all send note cards to anybody and everybody around that you might know who needs the reminder that God's love is for them. That's a part of setting people free, especially from the burden of thinking that maybe they don't belong, that they're not acceptable, they're not worthy. Any small gesture like that is part of God's grand work to set people free. This is the spot where the heist happens, and it happens in your life too, and it's going to happen in the course of this week as well. We're inviting you right here and now to look for ways in your own life, whether you come to the churchyard and help us plant tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers, or the situations right in your own backyard or with your own neighbors or your own work. Where are the places where you can help people to be set free? Because man, everybody seems to be held down by something. There's folks struggling with addiction. There's folks struggling with being told that they're not worthy. There's folks who are struggling with not getting enough food, with not being able to have a decent income or livelihood. There are folks who are held down by the powers of racism and hatred and being excluded. There's a million ways people are held captive. You and I have been pulled in by Jesus to be a part of his crew, to be a part of his heist crew, setting people free, plundering the powers of evil, and setting people loose and free in the world. That's what the work of Jesus is always. That's what it was 2,000 years ago, and that's what it is today. Come on and be a part of that with us. And if any of this sounds interesting to you, join us for more conversation this coming Sunday when we explore more about what it means to say Jesus is a thief of God, and he's pulled us to be a part of his grand heist of liberation for all people in all things. See you Sunday.